talk about 10 of the most common certification audit findings. First and foremost is this one. Number one on the list is the process risk and opportunities are not properly addressed. So if you notice, I've also included there the clause number, that's 4.4.1F. So if you may want to refer to your ISO 9001, we're using 9001 as a reference here. Go to 4.4.1F, you can find it there that the organization, it's stated, shall determine risk and opportunities found in the process. So this is very common. During audit, these are missed. They have documented the procedure, they have placed that in a very good flow diagram, the persons responsible are identified, what are the inputs, output, even the criteria are there. Unfortunately, in some cases, this may be a lapse. And so therefore, please take note of this. When you document your procedures, no matter how many would that be, maybe you have 20 to 200 procedures, depending on the size, scale, and scope of your organization, do not forget to determine properly the risk, not only the risk though, but the opportunities as well for these processes. And make sure that you include this risk in your risk management. As we all know in clause 6, that's planning, which is very specific towards risk management. So the identification of risk. Failure to identify this risk in the process would also compromise your risk management. I have always emphasized that. Let me repeat that. Failure to identify properly this risk in the process will also compromise your risk management in clause 6 down the implementation of your ISO 9001. The key here is for you to really accurately identify what a risk in this process. And not only that, capture as well the opportunities and then make sure that this risk identified in the process can be or should be included as an input in your risk management. Again, risk is defined as the effect of uncertainty. There can be risk of delays, risk of customer complaints, risk of financial losses, even risk of loss of reputation. So there are different kinds of risk. Of course, you need to identify what do you think are considered uncertainties for your organization. You can all, by the way, find these in your different processes. So first things first, make sure that you guide your process owners in carefully identifying what are process risk. That's our first really common certification audit finding. Not just basically simply documenting the procedure, but make sure that you identify the process risk and opportunities that go along with it. Okay? Second, I hope you're taking notes of this. Second is clause 5.2.2. This is the quality policy. You'd probably think, come on, this is just basic. This is fundamental. This is so common. But then again, in reality, when you're implementing QMS on the ground, this is one of the most common findings. One of the most common findings. When the auditors verify understanding of the quality policy in the organization, about only 10 to 15% of the process owners can, or of the employees, can actually explain what the quality policy is. So while most ISO certified companies would post the quality policy, it's hanging on the wall, you can see that it's probably in their IDs, playing on the screen saver of their computers. But when you ask the employees and the process owners, how do they understand the quality policy? They normally give you tentative and partial answers. That's an indication that they didn't really fully understand what the quality policy is all about. So make sure that you communicate this properly to the entire organization from top to bottom, even including your front lines, the security guards, the one who takes care of access to and exit to the organization should be your frontliners understanding what the quality policy of the organization is all about. What are the priorities of the organization? So the second most common certification audit finding is this: quality policy is not communicated, it is not understood, and most importantly, it is not applied within the organization. Because you should also be asking your employees and process owner, okay, now how do we apply this quality policy in the organization? Say, for example, your quality policy has 3 main highlights. The first one is the organization is committed to continuously meet and exceed the expectation of the customers. How do we apply that? So we have to make sure that in everything we do, the center of these activities should be that of the customer focus, customer satisfaction. The second maybe highlight in your quality policy is that, you know, the organization, it's stated in the quality policy, the organization is committed to continuously improve its processes. So what are evidence that the processes are indeed improved and evaluated? And lastly, maybe the organization, as stated in the quality policy, is committed to comply with all legal, regulatory, and statutory requirements. These 3 highlights, for example, in the quality policy should be properly communicated And most importantly, understood by employees in the organization. If you are about 1,000 strong workforce, there you go. You need to cascade it to this 1,000 strong workforce organization. A certification body auditor will just randomly pick who among your employees would they like to ask about the quality policy. So make sure that it is communicated. Make sure that it is understood, not only communicated, but understood. And of course, most importantly, applied within the organization. Second, most common certification audit findings during third-party audits. There are, again, 101 ways to communicate your quality policy. So you have to choose which one is suitable for you. Let's go to the third. The third most common certification audit finding is this. It's in clause 6.2.1b. All right, clause 6.2.1 Bravo of your ISO 9001 2015. It's talking about quality objectives. Okay, quality objectives. Quality objectives are not measurable. This is so common. As stated in ISO 9001 2015 clause B, your quality objective should be measurable as stated by the standard. When you present your quality objectives to the certification body auditors, the first thing they check is that, okay, how are you going to measure this? Is this quantifiable? As a matter of fact, we always advise this to our clients, to our projects. If there are no numbers in your quality objectives, that's not measurable. So make sure that you put some numbers there. What do I mean by that? Say, for example, if the objective has something to do with improving customer satisfaction, the quality objective then can be reduce customer complaints from 30 complaints every month to 10 by the end of, say, December 2020. So it changes the whole situation. It changes the whole picture because you have just simply put a number there. It becomes quantifiable. Then it's easy to measure. You've even mentioned a date. By the end of December 2020, you would know when the target is achieved. Again, very simple fundamentals, but then more often than not overlooked. As we all know, quality objectives, to make it measurable, it has to be SMART. You all know what SMART is, right? S stands for specific, M for measurable, A for attainable, R, it should be relevant, T, it has to be time-bound. Third most common certification audit finding is this, that the quality objectives are not measurable. It still has something to do with your quality objectives. It's in 6.2.13. The quality objectives are not monitored. So we have one project, after heeding our advice, they made sure that all of the quality objectives, targets, and programs are now measurable. They have placed all the numbers there. They have even assigned different indicators. They have qualitative metrics, they have quantitative metrics, there are leading and lagging indicators, process indicators, inputs, and so on and so forth. All the criteria are there. It's so measurable. But one thing they forgot during implementation is the monitoring. So you have to ensure that you also monitor the objectives as required by 6.2.13 in the ISO 9001. So you have to present monitoring reports, monitoring sheet, whether it's on a daily, monthly, quarterly, or annual basis. There has to be some evidence of monitoring that indeed you have been following, tracking, monitoring whether the objectives are met based on the metrics that you have set. For example, the metric you have set there in relation to this, let's say, repairs and maintenance procedure is that zero delay. Have you tracked this on a monthly basis? Maybe another metric is zero equipment downtime. Have you tracked this on a, say, monthly or weekly basis? It has to be monitored, as monitoring is one of the evidences that is required for us to present during certification audit, right? During certification audit. Get that? Okay. Now, moving on, let's go to the fifth. So look at this, clause 7.2D, appropriate documented information as evidence of competence are not retained. What is clause 7? Clause 7, if you can recall in your ISO 9000, support, which means resources. So human resource is one of the basic resource requirements in your ISO 9001. And in particular here, if you look at clause 7.2D, again, this is common lapse during audits when they are asked to present documented information in relation to competence of employees, for example, training records, for example, even just a simple attendance sheet or the simple training evaluation forms, all of these are lacking. Even just a simple certificate of completion, which serves as an evidence of competence, are disorganized. So make sure that, number one, you have a training needs analysis. Okay. Number two, you have a training plan. Number 3, you may have a training calendar. And number 4, evidence that all these trainings are conducted, and you get records that these trainings are implemented through certificates of completions. Maybe you have course exams, maybe you have even class photos and all that, that will support this evidence of competence. And of course, when we say competence, you also need to evaluate whether such training was indeed effective. Did it improve the competence? Did you close the competence gaps of the employees or the process owners who attended the training? All right. So those are examples of documented information as evidence of competence. Make sure that you have them in place. So let's go to the second half. Number 6, let's talk about documentation. In clause 7.5.1a, it states here that documented information required by the international standard are inadequate. Let me repeat that. This is common. Documented information required by the international standard are inadequate. Meaning to say maybe it's lacking. Okay. What do you mean, John, documented information required by this international standard? You mean to say there are documents required by the ISO 9001? The answer to that is yes. If you go to clause 7.5.1a, I actually call it type A because there are 2, by the way, type A, type B. There's also 7.5.1b. So, but now we're looking at 7.5.1a, so type A documents. Type A documents are required documented information by the ISO 9001 2015. Absence of any one of this may be an issue during certification audit. As a matter of fact, there are 31 documented information required by this international standard. All right, 31 from the scope of the QMS, that's from 4.3 up to the corrective action report down to 10.2, right? We all know that it's from clause 4 to clause 10. There are 31 of them. And it's important that you have to identify these 31 documented information. Now you have to map your ISO 9001 and identify in the standard this required documented information. Your clue or your guide there is that whenever you see a clause and the standard says that this documented information should be maintained and retained, by all means, you must have that. So you have to present that during audit, because if you could not, that might be an issue. If you want to know more about this 31 documented information and how to identify them and how to control them, let me just invite you to this document control training on September 21. Join us there. We're going to discuss this thoroughly in one full day. Moving on, let's go to number 7. The 7th most common certification audit findings is this. It's found in clause 7.51a of your ISO 9001. Documented information of external origin determined by the organization to be necessary for planning and operation of the QMS are not identified and controlled. We all know that we do not only manage documented information internally, we also have documented information externally, documents coming from external sources. We all have interested parties, right? From suppliers to maybe strategic alliances, partnerships, regulatory agencies, wherein we exchange documents with them and we get documents from them. Let's say report, we fill it up and we submit it to them. These are examples of documented information of external origin. During certification audits, the organization could not present a master list even of documents of external origin, especially if this documented information of external origin are necessary for the quality management system. To add to this, it is actually the organization who will determine what are documented information needed for their QMS. Okay? If you're submitting reportorial, say, documents quarterly to, say, your regulatory agencies, that should be part of your documented information of external origin. Okay, not all, because again, there's so many documents of external origin. You need to just identify what are these. Maybe manuals coming from government agencies, maybe even the operator's manual of an equipment that you purchase from a supplier can be considered as a document of external origin. And so this must be identified and controlled. During audit, this is one of the common lapses. The organization could not show evidence that they have indeed identified this and controlled. Number 8, in clause 8.2.3.2 and clause 8.2.4. This is in operations now. If you have observed or if you have noticed, this common certification findings can be found from clause 4 to clause 10, no, across these different elements of the ISO standard. I'm not saying this is the only. There may be other certification audit findings, but like I said, this is common. Number 8, documented information of the review, including new requirements for the product and services, are not retained. So when the certification auditors would ask for documents pertaining to the product and service, usually this is where the problem is coming from. This is design and develop. Either you're a product-oriented or a service-oriented organization, you need to have documentation on what your product or service should be, the specification of your product and service. So it can be a product spec, it can be a service spec, it can be the design of the product or the design of the service. And we all know that in clause 8.3, which is design and development, whether it's a product or a service, it goes through the design and development life cycle, from the inputs to the design, to the outputs, to the review. And more often than not, documented information pertaining to this design and development could not be represented, and they're not readily available, especially in the review of this product design and service design. What do you mean review, John? Of course, your product design and service design may undergo changes. The moment you make changes in your design review and product review, you need to capture those changes in a documented information, in a form of an amendment. So you may have amended documented information pertaining to the product review and the design review. Okay, did you get that? So make sure that you keep track of these changes, control of changes, in relation to the changes in the design of the service and the design of your product, especially when you review it. So if you notice, most of these are found on documented information. So indeed, when we do conduct audits, you have to make sure that you, of course, present evidence. In audits, auditors look for audit evidence. And always the best evidence is the record itself, otherwise known as a documented information. Number 9 is still a documented information record, right? So in clause 8.2.3.2 and 8.2.4, this is particularly on release of products and services. Again, whether you're a product-oriented or a service-oriented organization, you need to have a mechanism there on how do you actually release the service, or how do you actually deliver or release the product and service to the end user, to the customer. You need to show some documented information there as well. What do we mean by this? Documented information pertaining to, let's say, for example, conformity to acceptance criteria. What are acceptance criteria? Is there evidence that indeed the customer or the end user accepted the product or the service? Based on the acceptance criteria, you have met the needs, expectations, and requirements of the customer or the end user, and hence the product or the service is finally accepted. Otherwise, it is returned to you to make some changes again, unless, of course, until it is received and accepted by the customer. So documented information pertaining to conformity to acceptance criteria. And not only that, when we say release, documented information also pertaining to traceability, to the person who authorized such release. Who authorized it? Do you have documented information relating to traceability as to who authorized the release? So this is again very common during audits. The organizations or the auditee would normally, again, if I can use the word panic, what is the documented information again? Do we have that? Whether you are a production plant, whether you're a government agency, whether you're a private company, at the end of the day, you release your product and your service. Make sure you have documented information in relation to the releasing of the products and service. So finally, there is exit survey in the chat as we are about to wrap this up. And I think there are questions as well in the room. I'll try to answer them. Please do not forget to fill up the exit survey form and help us improve the way we help you in your implementation of your quality management system. Good morning to all of you, by the way. I have in front of me a list of all of you who are joining here. Thank you for joining us. Quite a long list, by the way. So thank you for joining us. I'm so glad that we're together every week. Lastly, here's number 10, certification audit finding. Evidence. This is coming from 10.2. Number 10, evidence of the nature of the non-conformities and any subsequent actions taken and the results of any corrective action are not retained. This is your corrective action report. Evidence of the nature of the nonconformities is stated in the corrective action report. And what's wrong with the corrective action report? The corrective action report is found to be inadequate in the root cause analysis. The root cause analysis actually could not identify the right root cause. This is so common. The auditee doesn't know how to identify the root cause. The internal auditor doesn't also know how to correct the corrective action report, or meaning evaluate the corrective action report and approve it. There are occasions where the internal quality auditors just evaluates and approves the corrective action report and let the auditee implements it, and only to find out that they have to redo the corrective action report again. The corrective action report is supposed to prevent the recurrence of the nonconformance. This is very common. What to do about it? What to do about it? You need to enhance your root cause analysis skills. You have to ensure that you understand, of course, apply some methods there. Maybe you're using 5 whys already. We have covered these topics in our previous weekly webinars. What is 5 whys? What is Ishikawa diagram or fishbone diagram? I've even shared with you the 4 types of problems. So these are 4 of the basic root cause analysis tools that you can use. Focus on the root cause analysis, because the root cause analysis is key in coming up with accurate corrective action reports. Let me also take this opportunity, by the way, to invite you to our ISO 19011 2018 auditing guidelines. We're doing that sometime on Monday. That's going to be on Monday. That's 1 full day. So we would like to see you there. So there you go. Those are 10 of the common certification audit findings that we have consolidated over a decade of doing consulting across hundreds of projects in Southeast Asia. I think that's it for today. Enjoy the rest of your day. Join us again next Friday, the same time, 9 o'clock, as we continue to discuss on how else can you effectively implement your ISO management system. This has been Jong Fernandez. What a pleasure indeed. Thank you so much. Stay safe, stay healthy, always do what you love.